Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 5 of the Happy Poly Days series. Today, I am speaking with Polyamfam, also known as Chad, and he honestly needs no introduction because if you follow me, you probably also follow him. We're both polyamorous meme creators, and apart from talking about our content creation, today we will also be talking about toxic masculinity in polyamory. So, Chad, just in case there is someone out there who follows me who somehow doesn't also follow you, could you please tell us more about what you do on Polyam Fam and yeah, just generally more about yourself?
Yeah, so Polyam Fam is essentially, like you said, a meme page, and I've been doing more like TikTok style videos as well. And all of my content is pretty much geared towards normalizing polyamory, giving people kind of a safe space to be their polyamorous self without any sort of judgment, and just kind of making it more normal, normalizing all of non-monogamy, not just polyamory, but all of non-monogamy.
Yeah, and honestly, like I'm so excited to kind of collaborate with you on this because
Yes.
I remember when I started my page in November 2020, and I think at that time you had around like 25K followers, and I was like, you were actually my inspiration for starting my page, and because like your memes was so fire, and I was like, I want to do this too, and now here we are, we're both kind of like working on this project together, and so yeah, like this is like a bit of a fan moment for me as well.
Making me blush.
So Chad, first question, like I would love to hear more about your polyamory origin story. This is something I ask every one of my guests. I think everyone has something interesting to say, and specifically, since we're going to be talking about toxic masculinity and kind of masculinity in general today, I would love to hear kind of, like as a man, like what struggles you had like in the early days of practicing polyamory that like you kind of unlearned like over time.
Yeah. So like most people, most men too, I have not been polyamorous for most of my life. I've only been polyamorous since early 2019. I was in a monogamous marriage prior to that. I had known that my partner had been in other relationship styles before and other structures. So it was something that was not entirely surprising, and something I kind of expected. So in early 2019, when she met someone at a bar that we were both at, nothing shady, like I knew about the whole thing, and they exchanged numbers, I kind of asked her, I'm like, what is this? And she basically didn't know, and which came as kind of a shock to me because we had just not like had to talk about it before. But then we did have that difficult talk about something we kind of both knew would be a thing we would talk about and explore eventually. Yeah, and initially, like most men, I had to deal with a ton of unlearning. I never had something like a one penis policy, but I did kind of have a preference to like ease me in and just be like, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. And I tried to own that stuff as best I could, but often it's very difficult as a man to own that stuff because it's hard to sort out what, especially when you're starting out, what is something you need to unlearn and what's something that just needs to be handled in a different way. So it's very chaotic. But I had to unlearn all sorts of stuff, like feeling like other men were competition, so much stuff like that. The competition thing really, because I knew in my head that I did not view women as a threat to my relationship, but I did view men that way. And I acknowledged that, and I knew that wasn't quite right, but I didn't quite know how to get to the point I was going to. But luckily I had the foresight to like, name it and know that I had some work to do and that wasn't a right thing to think or feel. So yeah, got through a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and I know that you've collated a lot of questions like from your followers, kind of related to kind of masculinity and unlearning kind of beliefs and kind of just processing jealousy and that kind of thing. And we will be dealing with these questions like later on. But like I guess like what was your process like in terms of kind of unlearning? The first step is like acknowledging that like you have these kind of core beliefs, and I think that's probably like the most difficult step, right? Because I think no one likes to think that like they're they are still holding on to like racist or homophobic or like misogynist kind of beliefs. And then after that, then what?
Well, I dove headfirst into the polyamory subreddit for a while. That was like my initial, just like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here. I need to learn like the, ground rules, as it were. So I hopped on that. I like Googled pretty much anything I could think of, I got a couple of books, but I got to be honest, I never actually finished them. And
Which
a
ones?
lot. Okay, so More Than Two, which has a problematic,
Yeah,
controversy to it.
yeah.
We bought The Ethical Slut later, but I never I was just so busy at the time. It's not that I don't want to read it. It's just I got so busy at the time. I just didn't have
Mm.
the time to. And there were a couple more I can't really name, but those are the main two. We did read quite a bit of More Than Two, and this was kind of before the controversy broke out, or like before we really knew about it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. To be fair,
yeah.
I think I'm just going to like inject this here, like in case for people who don't know kind of what's the controversy with More Than Two. So basically,
Mhm.
More Than Two was
Right.
written by Eve Rickett and Franklin Vo, who were partners. And it came out in around 2019 that Franklin Vo was abusing Eve and had abused like about 10 other women and non-binary people over the course of a couple of years. And these 11 people kind of came out with full kind of allegations and kind of their survivors accounts and that kind of thing, and you can read more about that on itrippedonthepolystair.com. So like Franklin Rowe is basically just like a very much taboo kind of topic now. People
Yeah.
we've like the polyamorous community has generally kind of deplatformed him,
Mhm.
and I think he's only really active on like Quora now. But anyway, like, so that's kind of like the controversy. The thing is, like, More Than Two as a book has helped like a lot of people, and
Yeah.
it was also very formative to kind of my understanding of polyamory in the early days. And so I don't write off the book completely. I do still think that it has value. However, I think that it's really important not to to put people on a pedestal. I think it's really important to read everything you write with a critical eye, particularly with things as personal as relationships, because ultimately we
Yeah.
all, like define and like relate to people like in different
Yeah.
ways, and one person's experience can't be 100% universal. So there are definitely things in More Than Two that I look back at now and I think like that's a bit problematic, and I think in the wrong context could really lead to some very like toxic and perhaps even abusive situations. But I think
Mhm.
it's still, the subtitle of More Than Two is like a practical guide to polyamory, and I do think that it offers a lot of really really good practical tips. So don't write it off
Yeah.
completely, but just take everything with a pinch of salt.
Oh
um
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Because like I said, that was the one that I actually read part of. I never finished it, but like that was, and like there is information. There was like, from what I remember, there was quite a bit of information in that book that this person clearly was not practicing it themselves. So
Yeah, yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So totally agree on that. But a lot of my experience, as much as, because I would read about people's like questions and stories on the subreddit, and a lot of my experience came by practice. And I know that sounds like on the face that I was, just diving in unprepared, but no, I did a whole lot of research. But like a lot of the actual like learning and coming to terms with things, like actually having it sink in, came from practicing polyamory after I had prepared as much as possible. Because there's just so many things that you can read about all day long, and you just don't know what it feels like until you're in it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Like, which is, it's hard to, that's not a satisfying answer for anybody, but it's just the truth.
Yeah.
But then yeah, after that, so we started, my wife and I started dating, kind of this, it was almost like a triad but with couples,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah. Okay, so
like
wait, so
like
three pairs of couples, you mean?
yes,
Okay.
three previously monogamous couples.
Okay.
um yeah, and
Hmm.
we had all been friends previously. This wasn't like, these weren't brand new people. So we all were comfortable with each other, and it was a nice kind of just environment to kind of, a lot of us, like, we were kind of learning the same things, but also some of us like were more comfortable with certain things. So it was a good like learning ground.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and then after that, we kind of, because we didn't typically, my wife and I don't typically, and never really typically dated as a couple. Like,
Hmm.
I'd say we did for like a very short period when we first, or attempted to when we first like opened up, but we quickly both realized like, I don't think this is really what we want to do. Like, I think that can be valid. I think there are issues with it, but it can be valid, but that just wasn't really for us. Anyone we date together, it pretty much happens organically,
Hmm.
or now entirely happens organically. We don't force anything. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of went from there. And since then we've had, various relationships of all kinds and all types. And I feel like it's as again, unsatisfying as an answer as this is, some of the things I look back on, like as far as like, things I knew were problematic at the time, but I was very in my feelings about them. It's amazing how I look back on those things now and I'm just like, whoa, like I feel so much better. Time helps a lot. Like as unsatisfying as that is, time helps a lot.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. I think also like it's just about, I think change is destabilizing, right, in any
Oh yeah.
situation. And so, like something that I tell my clients a lot, like when I kind of do my peer support sessions, is like, um, you know, exclusivity, like for a lot of people, like is like the bedrock of the monogamous relationship. And like, like the whole idea of you kind of being devoted to each other and like forsaking all others, etc., etc. Like that is like the foundation like of your love, like of your relationship. So when you open up, you are literally taking that foundation away. Like how could you
Yeah.
not feel like scared as shit like by
Yeah.
all of it, right?
You're getting rid of the reason you started your relationship,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, well, yeah, like because like love is so kind of tied into like exclusivity for so many people, and then people
oh
just
yeah.
forget that, like, oh well, actually, like, I'm with my partner not because like like I'm in a relationship with my partner not because like I'm trying to stop them from like having sex with or falling in love with anyone else, but because like I feel like a deep like trust and intimacy with them. Like we are very like emotionally compatible. I want to support them on their goals. I want to like like be there for them when they're sad. Like it's that whole thing. It's like what you bring into the relationship rather than what you keep out of it. Like as Jess from Remodeled Love like very accurately said one time, and she was kind of talking about her marriage. Like I think that's
Yeah.
the reframing that people have to do, and obviously that is super tough because like you can kind of believe something logically, but then emotionally I think it's very difficult to internalize.
Oh
Yeah,
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 absolutely. Just
yeah.
nail on the head right there. Completely. It's turning something that you took for granted for so long just upside down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something that you just thought was, took for granted and thought to be true the entire time, just
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, oh, maybe it's not. And that's just very jarring in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So like what do you think are like the most kind of common um uh I guess like hurdles that polyamorous men, who are, or rather men who are kind of exploring kind of polyamory and non-monogamy, like what do you think are like the most common hurdles that they face? Like, this might not be specific to kind of your experience as a man yourself, but kind of
Mhm.
based on what you've seen, and if you have anything from like your own personal life to say, like, I would love to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I think the biggest one is just processing jealousy about other men. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I said, even when you name it and it's there, that doesn't make it like just, oh, it's fine now, right? Like you still have to chew on those things. You still have to like digest them and just like figure out, even if you know where you want to be, or at least the direction you want to go, you still have to go in that direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not over when you just like realize it's there. And there's like it's such a difficult question because like there are, and I've gotten one of the reasons that I kind of came up with, I guess, at the time, was just like, oh, well, it's not that I don't trust my partner with other men, it's that I just don't trust other men, right? And I see that
Mm.
as a really common like rebuttal to,
Yeah.
defending like things like one penis policies. But to that I say, like, it should always be about trusting your partner's taste in men, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
another step there. And because I get that feeling, like I've had people come after me for basic like trashing men because of like specific behaviors, not all men, whatever,
Yeah.
like I hate that fucking phrase so much,
Yeah.
but like I've had people just like trash me from like, oh, you hate men or whatever. I'm like, I mean, I don't hate myself and I am one, so obviously I don't fucking hate all of you. But like we have these discussions all the time, both in monogamous world and the non-monogamous world, of like how badly a huge portion of men treat women when it comes to dating. So like that's the, there's reasons behind this. It's not that someone woke up and just decided men suck and we hate them all. Like there's reasons, there's experiences behind all these things. And it's hard to get over. And like, I think part of the reason that men do have a tough time is because they know other men, right? they do know, like, like, what if I'm working through my shit, but what if this other man isn't working through his shit? And like,
Yeah. Yeah. I
which
think, yeah.
credit to women, because I don't think like men are very often, especially in like, hetero presenting relationships, at least,
Hmm.
they don't even like have to think about other women, because like whether they acknowledge this or not, they kind of just implicitly trust women more.
Mm, yeah. No,
Uh,
I think like also, like what you said, about kind of competition around, like other men, like what you said about, ultimately this is an
mhm.
exercise in trusting your partner, because it's like, okay,
Oh yeah.
well, I was like if someone says, okay, I it's not that I don't trust my partners, I don't trust like the guys that like my partner might be with, and it's like, okay, but your partner, you know has like a certain type of taste in men, and if they chose
Mhm.
you and you believe that you yourself are a good man, then what reason would your partner have to pick other kind of like shitty guys, like, I mean,
Right.
this doesn't always hold up, because I've definitely seen situations where like because someone already has like a good kind of secure partner, then like they end up like looking for like, really like passionate relationships
Mhm.
that also might not be the healthiest for them. So this doesn't
Mhm.
hold up in 100% of situations, but what I say is like, you're a partner, not a parent, right? Like you are not your partner's
Right.
chaperone. And like obviously
Well,
like,
I'm
yeah.
doing polyamory to fulfill unmet needs, and one of my unmet needs is an unhealthy relationship. I need to experience that.
Oh god, no, but like, like you shouldn't kind of like, obviously if you see your partner in a situation that is like a bit sus, like obviously speak out about it like you would if your best friend was in like what you saw to be like a toxic relationship. But then
Mhm.
ultimately you need to, I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is like, you need to let your partner make their own mistakes, because
Absolutely.
and I think only in like the most extreme cases, right? Like
Mhm.
would that kind of not hold up? But I think in the vast majority of cases, like you have to kind of let your partner like learn their own lessons, and the more you kind of try and like control them and go like, no, like don't do that thing, the more they're gonna like fight back against that, or like,
Mhm.
maybe even go behind your back, and it's just not gonna, it's just going to engender like a lot of resentment between the two of you. And I
Mhm.
think that people really struggle with that, because like, I feel in a sense that particularly in monogamous relationships, there is this entitlement to your partner's time and space. There's this idea that like your partner's time with you is the default, and like any time that they spend with
Right.
other people is time being taken away from you and time that is being borrowed from
Oh
you.
yeah. I went through that for sure. Pretty specifically, like we had a very specific conversation at one point. Like, well, I have up until this point, we've spent basically like, unless something's going on, we spend our nights together. That's a thing we do like every day. We're nesting partners. So like we had specific conversations of like, I want at least this much time with you like per week, right? Which like can be a healthy conversation, but can also like not be. It just kind of depends, like but
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also, what you said, like I think, me and my partner do the same thing where we have like one date night a week, right? Like a proper like
Mhm.
date night rather than just like us existing in our house together. And I
Right.
think that is really important to kind of maintaining like, fun and excitement and desire in long-term relationships, right? Because otherwise you end up treating your partner as the default and they're just like there.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
but I think, but also, like by being like too strict around like things like time, like, if you say like I need to spend like 2 hours, 3 hours, like or whatever doing this thing per week, then it, you, like, while I see the value in that, there's also the flip side of like, quantity of time does not necessarily guarantee quality of time. Like you could just
Mhm.
be 2 or 3 hours like sitting like watching a movie together and you're not like connecting and bonding, right? Like
Right.
I think you can spend all your time with your partner and still not have a meaningful relationship, which is why kind of focused, kind of devoted, and like undistracted kind of quality time is really important.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
I think like, so you mentioned kind of competition around kind of, with like other men and kind of having to unlearn that. And I think like another aspect to competitiveness, or like that I feel that men experience, like, not, I'm not speaking at like, from my own experience, but from kind of watching my partner who is like you, a cishet
Mhm.
man. um I think like there's a lot of competition around uh you and your partner's dating life specifically. So like as a woman, as a bisexual woman, like I have a lot more kind of like sexual opportunities, even if I don't take 90% of those opportunities because a lot of people are really creepy. But like I do have more like options, right?
Mhm.
And whereas like my partner really struggles to even get a text back, like most of the time. And I think there's an argument to be had about like, well, women get more matches, but like, do they get quality matches? And I
Oh
come,
yeah.
yeah, and I like, obviously I 100% see that, but then at the same time, I think it can be a real hit to someone's confidence if they're like not getting any matches at all, or like,
Oh yeah.
oh, they are getting matches, but they aren't getting, they message like a ton of people and only like one of them responds.
Yeah.
Is
And
that
I've
something?
experienced that.
Yeah, you've
Oh, go
experienced
ahead. Yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that very specifically because, like, when my wife and I opened up our marriage for the first time, we got on dating apps with our own, profiles separately,
Mm-hmm.
but we were both dating at the same time, kind of in the
Mm-hmm.
same way. So it was very easy to like see each other, and we're nesting partners. We live together, so it's very easy to just like experience what it's like for the other person. And our communication was very open, so we would
Mm-hmm.
talk about it all the time too.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I would get very, very few matches. And I've had more than one conversation of just like, man, I'm just feeling like overwhelmed by the amount of attention that you get compared to me. And it just
Mm.
feels like so shitty. Like it makes me feel like I'm just like not worthy, like, that I'm just not appealing or whatever. And then there was a night, I think multiple nights, where my wife showed me her matches and we're like, I need you to take a look at this. And I was just like, oh, I don't want that.
Oh.
Like there's a whole nother side where like you said, digging through all of that, like those
Mm-hmm.
weeds, for like, at least when I got matches, like the quality was like fairly high. Like they were
Mm-hmm.
someone who was willing to talk about polyamory, or were already in a polyamorous relationship or whatever. And like I got very few people who, just wanted to like say use me for sex and like, move on. Whereas, my wife's inbox was just full of garbage. She had to like, where I was working to get matches, she was working to sort out like the matches that she had gotten. It was basically like the same effort, just kind of one step apart, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
like
I think that's key. I think that's key,
oh yeah.
to recognize. And yeah, and also if you're, specifically looking for romantic relationships, most people would like write off like a polyamorous dynamic, but most people are also
Mhm.
willing to have, but most people are willing to have kind of casual
Yeah.
sex, particularly guys, right?
And
I
this is
mean,
this is
yeah.
hard to this is hard to realize, but I like something I've said multiple times is like, look, the reason as like a cishet man that you're not getting as many matches is not the fault of women. Mostly it is the fault of other men for giving them such a bad experience that they just, want to match so infrequently, right?
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
like they are the reason you are or are not getting matches is based on, experiences that these people are viewing your profile have had. It doesn't matter. Like you can have a great profile, you can be a great person, but if that doesn't match up with what the person looking at your profile has experienced, you have no chance. And that's
Yeah.
completely out of your control. And that's
Yeah.
really hard to realize and hard to like get to sink in, but it's the truth.
I think I would also add another aspect to that complicates this even further, is that like the
Mhm.
vast majority of women are caught in like a catch-22 situation, like when it comes to kind of expressing themselves like in sexually, like, or whatever, like on dating apps, right? Because you want to, I think like women are held back by like this kind of societal expectation that like you have to be sexy but not sexual.
Yeah.
And so
Oh yeah.
like and if you say kind of yes to like an encounter, then like you're labeled a slut, and if you like hold back a little bit, then you're labeled a prude, and then you're caught in this double bind that like a lot of women just are stuck and they don't know what to do, so they don't do anything at all. Which
Yeah.
is, I
And
think, is like a
it's
big reason why like my partner will message, these women will match with him, but then they might not respond,
yeah.
because there's clearly like an interest there, like, right? That's why these, like, well, some of them are bots, but like some of them,
Yeah.
but like, but I do think like societal expectations of women in kind of like dating and sex also kind of plays like a major role in this. And that's why like so many men are like, why aren't they texting me? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
it's not you, buddy. Like I know this
Yeah.
sucks, but it's not you.
Yeah. And like I think I've posted about this before, I think in meme and tweet formats or whatever, just
Mm-hmm.
like toxic men love to complain that the people they're seeing aren't sexual enough, but it's because they're not willing to date a sexual person because they devalue them. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they're fucking themselves up. Like, it's like, you didn't want to date a slut, right? So yeah, the person you're dating is not that. Duh. Like,
He's like, I want to
if you
date a
want your partner to
virgin,
be
but like I want to
sexual,
date a
you have
virgin
to be
who's like so
willing.
good in bed. And it's like,
Yes, if you want to date, if you want your partner to be sexual, guess what? You have to be willing to date sexual people. Like, that's how it works. Like,
but yeah, like I think, yeah, so what the crux of what I'm trying to say is, like, the competitiveness comes out not only with other, like, your metamors, right, the people your partner is dating, but also with your partner when it comes to kind of each of your dating experiences. And so yeah, so that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get at. I think another thing that I want to talk with you about is like how because of kind of like toxic masculinity culture and just kind of general patriarchy shit, I think a lot of men tie kind of their worth as men to their kind of performance in bed. And this is why kind of stuff like one penis policies crop up, because like men define their worth like so much like by their dicks, that like they get really insecure about like the idea like, oh, what if she finds someone who's bigger than me, who like is kind of more like aggressive or dominant or like whatever in that sense. And there's also this whole idea of like being a cuck, right? And it's very interesting like how kind of gender dynamics kind of play into like polyamory, because if if you're like participating in if you are like the outside person who is like engaging with like one half like of a couple, right? If you're like a man and you're engaging with a woman, then like you're like like the ball, right? Like you're like the sexual like conquest, or like you're like kind of seen as superior, right? Like to like the man like in kind of the relationship. Whereas like if you're a woman and you're engaging with the man, I feel like you're seen as like the home wrecker, like you're seen as kind of like inferior. And well, I think in that situation, both women, the like the wife or the girlfriend and like the person outside, the like both women are vilified. But I think like that kind of home wrecker narrative is more prevalent, and you are kind of yeah, you get a lot of shit thrown at you, right? Whereas like in if you're like the guy on the outside, like I feel like you get like a little less criticism. That's kind of my view anyway. And so like I think that's so interesting, because like these kind of narratives that are like based on gender, like I think like in some way get drilled into our heads. And so that's why people kind of like tie their worth to their sexual performance, and that's why like they get competitive with their partners about kind of dating, because it's like if your partner has more partners, then you are losing necessarily.
And I think the tying of men tying their self-worth to their sexual performance is just so deep-seated, because we start learning that as small children, not even necessarily teenagers. Like little kids make these jokes, right? Like that, just like as soon as they know what penises are, like the jokes and like shittiness starts happening. And usually like when we learn something shitty when we're a kid, we grow up, we grow into our teen years, and we grow into our adult years, and we like realize, oh, that's not the way the world works. But in this instance, society immediately validates us and tells us, yes, that is exactly how the world works. So I think that's why it's so deep-seated and baked in and hard to unlearn, is because we learn it at every stage of our growth, like into adults. Like as a small kid, like the jokes are funny, like ha ha ha. And then as a teenager, when you're learning what sex is, like you better fucking be good at it or your life is going to be shit. And then as an adult, it's just like, yeah, no, for real, like keep thinking that though. Like nobody, like so few people are out there telling people as they're maturing, that's not how it is. Right. So it just gets in there, just like from every different direction.
Yeah, like as a guy, it's like you better want it, and you'd better be good at it from the get-go, and you'd better have like a big dick, and like you'd better kind of like blow their minds like the first time. And it's like, whoa, dude, like you
got to go for hours every time. I've heard that one. That's the one that always gets me. And I'm like, freaking, I'm what? I don't have the cardio for that shit.
Yeah. And I think, this is, I think particularly like, so, like a gripe that I have, like even in, feminist circles, right, is that like when like women would kind of make jokes about, like about men, and, they see kind of a man doing like shitty behavior, right? Like their
Mhm.
first kind of insult is that like, oh, he must have a tiny dick and that's why he's like doing these shitty things. And it's like,
Guilty.
I don't know if body shaming is like the right response to kind of calling out a guy's behavior, right? Because
Right. And I see the reason, because like for a lot of dudes that like do like shitty behavior, that, you know, there is at least a grain of truth in there. Not necessarily that they, you know, have any
yeah.
sort of like size penis or whatever, but just like the insecurity,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
About that. Like, so
Yeah.
like there is a grain of truth, but yeah, I've had to unlearn that, and I'm still unlearning that, because I see like specific scenario every fucking time
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting at a restaurant outside and someone just fucking goes by revving their motorcycle as loud as they possibly fucking can. My brain immediately is just like, wow, what a big fucking dick. Like, you know, so I get it. Like I'm part of that, where I'm like, you know, trying to like acknowledge and unlearn that that's not exactly the direction we want to go in to make things better, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, I think like the main thing that like when I talk to men who are like insecure about kind of their partners dating other men, and that's like, you know, and if they recognize these beliefs that like they're like, oh, you know, I'm worried that she'll find someone who's bigger, someone who's better, blah blah blah, you know, like uh you know, I think like the main thing is that like I try to get people to realize that like they are defining themselves like, you know, by their gender, by their genitals, like by their kind of performance in bed, and they are like tying their worth to like certain aspects of themselves. And
Mhm.
then, you know, like I find it, well, you know, like the world focuses on gender like in a really insane way.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, no wonder kind of people are kind of making these arbitrary distinctions. It's like, okay, you can date women, but you can't date other men. Well, it's like, okay, well, you know, like what if you find like someone of any gender who is like funnier than me? Like why aren't
Oh
we kind
yeah.
of making comparisons on like who, like you can date people who are like less funny than me but not people who are more funny than me, or like or have this type of humor but not that type of humor. You know,
Mhm.
I'm trying to say like why is gender or like the type of what you have in your pants like the thing that people like fixate on when it comes to like comparing themselves, you know, on how they're like similar or different like to their partners, other partners. Like why is like gender the
Yeah.
thing that we are fixating on, when actually at the end of the day, right, like we are individuals, you know, like
Yeah.
we are individuals with unique things to offer beyond, you know, our performance in bed or like the, you know, our like our like the gender we are, and that kind of thing. Like there's
Yeah.
so much more that to who we are than
And
like what we do in the bedroom.
yeah, and I think it kind of ties into like the exclusivity thing. Like I think people hyper focus on that so much because, you know, in monogamy, that's one of the things that is kind of gated off to just one person. So you kind of take it for granted and don't have to worry about it so much, right? Even if you do have insecurities, you know, that other men are bigger or better or whatever, like you kind of, you don't, if you're monogamous, you just don't have to worry about it as much,
Mhm.
right? But when you're polyamorous, suddenly like this thing you've been learning all your life that you don't have to worry about. Ugh, I have to worry
Yeah.
about it. Like, because I've already spent a bunch of time worrying about if someone's like funnier than me, if someone likes this thing more than me. Like, you know, I've already
Mhm.
spent time where I've learned how to process all that, but I've never had to like learn how to process if someone's better in bed than me, because it's something that is usually just gated off to one person, right?
That is such a good point, Chad. And I hadn't considered it that way, but like you have 100% hit the nail on the head there. Like, because you think by creating exclusivity around sex, then like everyone kind of freaks out about like sex being like that, like one thing to get competitive about. And so, yeah, no, I hadn't considered it that way. You brought up a really good point there. And it's just like an insecurity that people like, you know, haven't had the time to process like up until like they open up a relationship and have to like stare that in the face.
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, so Chad, you've collated some questions from your followers, kind of to do with, you know, all of what we just talked about, basically. So do you want to kind of go through those now, and just kind of, yeah, and just
Sure.
kind of talk about them?
Yeah.
So the first question that we have, and these are all anonymized, by the way, is what does healthy masculinity in polyamory look like? Can you give one or two examples? So what do you think, Chad?
I think, I mean, first of all, to be like very direct, I think healthy masculinity looks like either not having or working towards not having uh very toxic masculinity sort of rules, right? I'm talking about like one penis policies stick out the most to me, like stick out. God damn it. I am 12. So like, I think that's the main thing it looks like to me, is just like unlearning like the actual like rules and boundaries. I don't like using the term like rules, but like people have them, right? Like rules and boundaries that aren't focused towards like preserving toxic masculinity or
Okay, but
protecting.
specifically things like, having like a one penis policy, like
Right.
not kind of, treating, if your partner dates like multiple genders, treating them kind of like the same rather than having kind of double standards depending on the gender.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you
um
mean?
Yes. And I think another thing is, shifting your mindset towards viewing other men not as competition, but as kind of a collaborative sort of like effort or whatever. Like,
Mm,
obviously, people have different structures where they do or don't want to know their metas and stuff like that. But, if you're in a situation where you want to know your metas, which I do recommend because it makes the whole thing a lot less scarier,
mm,
like you can, realize how you kind of like both contribute to your partner's happiness instead of working to like obtain your partner's happiness from the other person, right? Like
mm.
it's not necessarily a resource that you're trying to like scramble to get, like one of you is going to get it. But it's something you can both work towards making your joint partner very happy. Those are the couple
Mhm.
things that come to mind for me for that question.
Yeah, like I think like of like the whole, like a very kind of prevalent toxic masculine belief is like that you own your partner, right? So like the
Oh
more
yeah.
you see the more you see like your metamour as a person you can collaborate with like on this kind of project of making your partner happy rather than like being like the sole provider, right? Like the sole, whatever, like in this
Mm-hmm.
dynamic, or like kind of seeing your partner as like, taking your partner away from you rather than like, your partner being like a whole ass individual who can make choices about like who they spend their time with. I think like
Right.
that's kind of what healthy masculinity looks like to me too, you know so like not, like to recognize like the value and kind of the differences that you and your partner's other partners like kind of bring to your mutual partner's life, and to celebrate that rather than kind of like see it as like, a threat to like who you are as an individual, or like, even you like as a man.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I think like this can be very individual, right? Like I think there are probably a bunch of things we haven't touched on, but generally it's like, getting rid of that competitiveness and getting rid of that sense of ownership and entitlement. I think those are like the main things, and I wouldn't even say those are specific to men. I think that women can definitely feel entitled to their partners as well. um
Mm-hmm.
and so
For sure.
yeah. So how intertwined would you say the idea that a man owns his wife is with perceptions of polyamory? Now, I have a lot
Yeah.
of interesting things to say about this, but you go ahead,
Yeah.
Chad.
I think a lot. I think one problem is that when approaching polyamory and non-monogamy in general, a lot of times the only terms that people have heard that are like more household known terms are polygamy and
Mm,
swinging, right?
yeah.
And like outside of that, like I can't really think of any other non-monogamous terms I knew before actively looking into it, right?
Hmm.
I didn't know what the fuck the word polyamory meant.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so like my exposure to that and the exposure of like most lifelong monogamous people are those two terms. And while I won't call either of them inherently unethical,
Mm,
like there is a lot of like history and like problematic stuff with both of those terms that just kind of attach a lot of male focused sort of stuff that like attaches to your perceptions of what all of non-monogamy is, even
mm-hmm,
like kind of when you approach it knowing that's not what it is, you know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
Like you
hmm.
have a
Yeah,
lot of
absolutely.
preconceived notions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, even, like, so, polygamy is mostly like one man, multiple wives, right?
Right.
And then swinging is also known as wife swapping.
Right. Exactly. And like
Yeah.
it's very male focused. Very both of them are very, and like I said, I like I said, I hesitate to call in either of them inherently bad,
Hmm.
right? Like I
Yeah.
think people can be in situations where like, and I've said before, like on my page, on paper, like polyamorous is the term that I use. On paper, you could define me as a swinger too, right?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you just like go through, like if you find a checklist somewhere and like read them off, like I probably check all the boxes for that too. But
Yeah.
like there's this there's this whole culture about it that has existed for seemingly, at least in my perception, far longer than a
Mhm.
more equitable polyamory setup. And I think that, yeah, I think that really feeds into like owning your wife, right? And like
Mhm.
obviously, like you kind of said, women can feel like they own their partners too, but like it's so much more prevalent because I feel like men are taught that that's kind of the expectation. And a lot of that comes from just like, more like conservative values, especially like in America. We kind of mock like the 50s as like the decade that was just like men own their fucking wives.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that weird middle ground where society is progressing, but like we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in my experiences kind of creating on TikTok and getting all kinds of comments here and there, right? Like, you know, like a lot of people immediately assume that like it was my partner's idea, that like I was kind of tricked into this somehow, and that I'm being taken advantage of. And it's like, bro, no, like I was the one who introduced him to polyamory. I was the one with more experience than him when we started our relationship, right? Like he is the one who, like I consider myself like fairly kind of naturally polyamorous, and so like or rather not so much like naturally polyamorous, but like I definitely struggled with kind of opening up and just practicing polyamory generally in the early stages than most people. Whereas like my partner definitely had to go through a phase where like the jealousy was real.
Yeah.
And I think that often is the case. There's going to be one person who struggles it with more than the other.
Yeah.
But so it's so funny to me when people kind of like assume that like the women in the situation inherently just have no sexual agency. Like,
Yeah.
again, this is the focus on sex, right? Like they focus on
Yeah.
sex, and therefore they assume that it's the man's idea, because everyone assumes that like the men always want sex and the women have no agency in that situation, and therefore ergo like the women must have been tricked into the situation and like have
Yeah.
been kind of duped into like letting her boyfriend have like multiple girlfriends.
And for a more like quantitative kind of thing
Mhm.
instead of just like qualitative or whatever, like everyone, like we've talked about this in a group chat with a lot of people, everyone across the board as polyamory creators have more women followers, myself included.
Yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
is not just a trick pulling on women to get them. Like women, like I believe mine was like close to 70% women. And it
Mhm.
varies like back and forth, but that's fairly consistent. Like no matter how many followers I've had, it's always been majority women. So it's
Yeah.
not, even on a man's page, it's not just a bunch of men trying to trick women into, fucking them all the
Yeah. And
time.
also, even like a common rebuttal to that is like, well, women tend to use social media more. Now, okay, cool. But most of the polyamory creators are women. So, like if women were
Absolutely.
really hating this so much, then why are we talking about this in spades? Like,
Exactly.
I think like how many like male kind of polyamorous creators do I know? Okay, there's you, there's Roy
Ooh.
from Open Relating, and is that it?
There's a
Like,
few more.
there's a couple more, but
Yes, there's a couple
no
more,
one is
but
coming
like
to mind. But
exactly.
everyone else is a
Yeah,
woman,
but you can, yeah, but
or
you can
non-binary
easily
person.
rattle
But
off
yeah,
like 10 women content
yeah,
creators. You know what I mean? Like it is, and like that's not just because you're a woman and that's the names like, yeah, me too.
yeah.
Like that's like the same. We're in the same chats. Like we talk to the same people. Like,
Yeah.
this is a,
So this
yeah.
is clearly something
I
that
think
we
that's an
enjoy
interesting point.
doing.
Yeah,
It's like this is clearly something
exactly.
we enjoy. This is something we feel empowered by. This is like our idea. We know a lot about it. We're not just like getting tricked into something like
All right.
by like some dude, right? Like it's
You see, the thing is, Leanne, we tricked the women into creating content for us.
so meta.
Like Inception. We're playing 4D chess up here.
Oh my god. Yeah, so I feel we answered that. I think like there are a lot of societal expectations that kind of tie it
Oh, yeah.
with like kind of men's like ownership over women and like sexual agency of women in particular. So here's one. tips for introducing male partners to each other without sparking competition. Now, I think that's interesting because I can kind of tell it from the perspective of someone who has introduced two male partners to each other, and you can talk about the perspective of someone who has been introduced to other male partners.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you about, like, you know, what positive or kind of negative experiences have you had kind of meeting your partner's other male partners?
Yeah. Mostly, I mean, mostly all positive, because I kind of contribute, kind of, we touched on it earlier, like my partner's dating me and I'm not like a hyper competitive, like alpha male sort of whatever. Like, chances are the other people they date are also not necessarily going to be that way, because it's like, frankly, as far as my nesting partner concerns, not necessarily my other partners, but like, she doesn't, you know, find that as an attractive trait in someone. So like, I've kind of gotten off easy because it's just a thing that like she just doesn't like in a man, to be like super competitive and just like like stake my claim and like, you know. But I think it also just kind of depends. It's a little bit of a dice roll just on like personality types, because there are men who can get together who are normally not competitive, don't feel competitive at all, but when they get together with other men, suddenly the urge, like, you know,
Yeah.
comes upon you. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
consider myself one of those people, but like, I've met those people.
Yeah.
Not
two dudes could
necessarily
just
in like
not
a meta
vibe.
situation, but
Or two dudes could just
exactly.
not
Yeah,
vibe for a completely separate reason, right? You know, if they have different
exactly.
interests
Yeah,
or whatever. Um,
yeah.
yeah. So like, what attitude do you take, you know, to, like, if you say like you meet like your partner's other partner and they're perhaps kind of feeling nervous about meeting you, like, you know, what approach do you take to kind of, you know, relax, like get them kind of more like relaxed into the situation? Because like, this is something that my partner does. Like, he actively tries to, like, you know, be like super cool like with the other guy, so then the other guy's like, oh, okay, no, he doesn't hate me, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's I mean, the big thing that comes to mind is just finding common ground, you know. As sounds like a simple thing, but like, and you know, here's the perk that you didn't think about. Like, you already have some kind of common ground because someone chose the both of you. Like,
Yeah.
you have something in common. Like, the chances of this person picking literally just the polar opposite of you are pretty slim. Like, sure, you can be very different, no doubt, but like, you know, you have something in common that attracts you to this person, at least, right? But it doesn't have to be like, you know, you can find common interests, you know, find just something to talk about. I'm also just kind of fortunate in that, like, I'm kind of like a natural conversationalist, and I feel like I can talk about and listen about basically anything, even if I don't know shit about the things. So
yeah,
that
absolutely.
kind of helps. I know not everybody's like that, so that's not exactly a helpful tip. Be a different person. That's but yeah, like, finding common ground like sounds so simple, but just like, you know, it really does sometimes come down to just like breaking that ice and just, you know, like you said, kind of realizing that the other person has a lot of the same, you know, insecurities, nervousness that you do, and you know, you talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you prefer to meet your partner's other partners like with your mutual partner present, or do you prefer to like meet up with like your meta more one-on-one?
For first time interactions, I definitely prefer just our mutual partner to be there. Just because it kind of, I feel like it just helps it, like, I feel like it just helps it flow. Like, if you were meeting, like, kind of, if you were meeting just a platonic friend of a partner, like, you might feel a little awkward if they're not there, right?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like, wait, this is their friend and this is their partner, like, so yeah, I definitely prefer like them to be there, and it just kind of most of the time like works out that way, you know. We like similar things, so we go to similar things, like.
Yeah, like, for sure. Like, I think in my experiences of introducing male partners to each other, or just like, I mean, like, people of any gender, to be honest, but if we're going to talk about like two men specifically, yeah, I think like them having something in common is really important. I think there was one time where I was used to like a male kind of friend of benefits I had and my anchor partner to each other, and we met up specifically to play Smash Bros. And my friend with benefits completely demolished us. It was really funny. Like, he was just like beating our asses like for like an hour straight. It was really hilarious. Like, he was just dancing around us the whole time, and he's just like, oh, I'm gonna do that. Oh, you're dead. All right. And it was so funny.
I gotta say, I worry for the first time that one of my partners meets someone who thinks they're better at Guitar Hero than I am. Because then rocking on.
No, but like that can be fun, right? You can go like healthy,
right.
we love some good healthy competition, as long as you don't kind of go like, oh, he's better at Guitar Hero than me, and I feel that as like a that says something about like me as a man or whatever, then
yep, well, right? I guess I'm a garbage person.
Yeah, I guess I'm a garbage person. Yeah, like I think learn to separate that, right? Like
exactly,
like lose with grace, or and so yeah, like having common ground is really important. And then I think, like you said, you feel more comfortable with like your mutual partner present. I also have always kind of been there, like whenever introducing partners to each other the first time, because like I'm the go-between, right? Like I am the person kind of linking the two of them, so like I want to be there to just because I know both of them pretty well, so then I'm able to go like, oh, here's like something that you two can talk about, and then kind of let them interact, if like if things are if I kind of feel the need to kind of move things along. I think it's also really important to talk to each person beforehand about like what specific like anxieties like they might have about the other person, right? I think like obviously don't push your partners to meet each other if they don't want to meet each other. I think that's like that was a mistake I made in my early days. Like I think I was too eager to kind of see my partners interacting with each other, and definitely landed myself in some very awkward situations where like like one of my partners like got way too anxious about it, and then it just ended up being like just a very awkward time. I would also encourage, like, if like you don't want to make it like a whole like thing, I would encourage like you to kind of introduce your partners to each other at like a bigger event. So like rather than like going like the three of you like meeting up for coffee specifically could kind of like talk, if you're going to the same event, so, or like if you're going to like a mutual friends like party, and then you kind of like see each other at this event, then if things go bad or if it's awkward, then you can give each other an out, like there is like an opportunity for you to like not just kind of focus on each other, like if like you don't vibe for whatever reason, and you can kind of just like do other stuff. Like there is the option to like enjoy the event or like talk to other people. Like I think that's been really instrumental to kind of like having like a smooth interactions, because I think that if someone like goes to like say like a coffee meetup, right, then like they feel some people, particularly if you struggle with anxiety, like which one of my partners did experience, like you feel boxed in, right? You feel boxed in. He's like, I can only talk to this person or like talk to my partner, and it's like so like that's really that's like really important. And I think also another thing is like if it does get awkward, it might be best to acknowledge it. Like if you're feeling nervous about like meeting your partner's other partner, like they're likely feeling the same stuff, and it might be good to just get it out in the open and go like, I've been like feeling really nervous about meeting you, and so I might kind of like trip on my words a little, and but I do kind of want to get to know you. So instead of like the two of you just feeling a lot of nervous energy and not knowing what to do with it, so like I think just speak your thoughts, and like be honest about it.
And I think try not to let your nervousness turn you into someone you're not, right? If you have like a goofy kind of dumbass sense of humor like I do, like you let it shine. I met a metamorph very recently, and he had gone on a vacation with my wife previously or whatever, and we joked, because I had never met this person, we joked that when we were talking about her going on this trip, we're like, this is the part of the murder documentary where all the viewers say that this family's an idiot. Like, why are you doing this? But then so I like when we were talking about that, I told her the first thing I'm going to say to this person is thank you for not murdering my wife on an island. And I did. We met, and that's literally, I said this was the first thing I was going to say to you. Thank you for not murdering my wife on an island. And we were like instantly, it just like, if there was like, there wasn't really any nervous energy, but like if there was, it would have been like significantly diffused, right? Like don't be afraid to like just be yourself if you have like those kind of personality traits. Like it's it helps you relax, but it also helps the other person relax,
no, 100%. I think just like just laugh about it, and no, I that's such a funny line. I'm definitely gonna like tell my partner, geez, like thank you for not killing my partner while they were on a date. Thank you for not being a creep. Thank you for not being.
I was like eager to say it too. Like I knew they were coming, and I knew what I was gonna say, and I'm like, I get to say the punchline.
Oh my god. Oh, like that, no, that is genuine. That's the best. Like, yeah, so like I do think that like oh, like I do think that because of like the society we live in and like the heteropatriarchy and all that type of stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like men and women have very unique struggles, like when it comes to polyamory. Like, and that could not have been kind of more obvious, like through kind of like dating a man like myself and kind of just both of us like having completely like different like insecurities and struggles and kind of like issues, right? Like, and I think it's really important to talk about these things. And I think that like because so many polyamorous creators are women, I think we tend not, obviously we can only speak from lived experience, right? So I think it's really important to like speak with like polyamorous men, for them to kind of be open about like their struggles and like, like their emotions and, you know, like, yeah, like their insecurities, right? And I think that overall kind of contributes more to like, positive masculinity, like when kind
Oh
of men
yeah.
are able to kind of talk about their feelings and like admit kind of vulnerabilities. Like I think this is all yeah, so I think you're setting a great example for other men out there, Chad. Like I think that your
I
work is
try
really
to
valuable.
like, and that's actually something I discovered that my followers want more of from me.
Mhm.
Like I've been more, because like for the longest time, my page was like basically just polyamory, right?
Yeah.
Like the name is fucking polyam fam, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But more recently, I've been posting more stuff about like toxic masculinity and problems that men deal with, in polyamorous relationships, and people clearly fucking love it. So I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna keep posting. I literally, before we got on this call, I was recording a TikTok about that thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, yeah, and because I agree. I think that's an important conversation to have, and there's not a ton of creators out there doing it. And I also like, I will forget this if I don't say it. There's a podcast called Molding Masculinity.
Mhm.
That, disclaimer, I am very biased because this person has been my friend forever. I've been on an episode and I made their cover art. So I'm about as biased as you can possibly be, but it is legitimately just a great podcast about like unlearning, and it's not even just for polyamorous folks. Like it's for pretty much anyone. Like they had an episode about polyamory with me on it, but
Mhm.
like it's accessible to like anyone, and it really like kind of really deep dives into like why men have certain toxic attitudes and what we can do to like shift them to a better place.
Yeah.
Just I had to get that plug in there because I'm like, I will forget if I do not, and it's on my mind right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's so good and so relevant. Like I honestly think that there need to be like more like good like male role models like in the polyamorous community who like openly kind of talk about like like the topics that you are now like focusing more on, because like there aren't enough of us, and as lovely as it is, having kind of so many women like and non-binary folks and queer folks like talking about polyamory and like and all the stuff that comes around, like at the end of the day there are lived experiences that we can't cover and like struggles
Yeah.
that like we can only kind of talk about from like the perspective of like observing like our male partners or like from like stories that we've heard from other people, right? So like for
Mhm.
you to be kind of out there, cis het, right, straight white man, right, kind
Right.
of like talking about these things and like being like such like a positive force for like being like open and honest about like these like very like thorny issues, like I think is like
Yeah.
a really great thing.
And I think the community as a whole has just
Mhm.
gotten started talking about this, because like, we post about like polyamory all the time, but like I feel like the community as a whole, myself included, has barely even scratched the surface on like all of the overlapping intersectional issues that happen.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Like, so
absolutely.
there's so much more to like discuss, and I'm excited to do so. Just all the time.
Okay, so where like I'm sure like if like most people are not living under a rock, so they probably do already
Mhm.
follow you, but in case someone has been living under a rock and does not follow Chad, where can people find you?
I am polyam fam pretty much everywhere. On Twitter, I am the polyam fam because the handle was taken, and of course it's an
Damn
inactive
it.
account too. And I'm like,
Ah.
damn. I kind of like it's also it's my least active platform, so I'm like, whatever, it's fine.
Okay, yeah.
But TikTok, Instagram, and more recently YouTube are my three like primary channels right now. I also post all my stuff to Facebook under the same name, Polyam Fam. But like if I'm interacting with it, it's primarily on Instagram. Like that's kind of where my interaction with the community lives the most, is Instagram, and more recently TikTok and YouTube. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like my YouTube, I have had my YouTube channel for a very long time, but it's not been particularly active. But your videos have been great, and there aren't many polyamory videos on YouTube, so that's a niche that I'm very excited to see you get into. But yeah, this has been an amazing chat, Chad, and I'm sure that many people, not just men, but people of all genders, men and people dating men, and yeah, will have learned a lot from this. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Oh,
wait, we didn't answer the one question.
Oh,
the thing.
Oh my God.
Question that everyone always asks us.
Are we dating?
Question?
Are we dating?
No,
we're not. We are not dating.
Just to clear the air, we're not.
The suspense.
Right.
Like, everyone was just like, that is like the one thing that I needed to know. No, we are not dating. And
sorry to disappoint everybody.
But yeah, game recognized game, Chad. Like, as like a fellow polyamorous meme creator, I applaud you for your work, and I hope to collaborate with you more in future. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Bye.